Hello, my name is Alicia Goodman with ASCD's marketing team. Welcome to Digitally Speaking, Creating Exceptional Podcasts, Videos, and More with Eric Palmer, part of the ASCD Summer Boot Camp webinar series on classroom technology. This webinar is brought to you by Adobe Presenter. The all-new Adobe Presenter 10 enables educators anywhere to flip learning. You can easily create video lectures from your desktop, share course materials with students, and track learner progress without investing in an LMS. Find out more at www.adobe.go/flipclass. And now for a brief introduction to our presenter. Eric Palmer is a professional speaker and educational consultant from Denver, Colorado, whose passion for speaking has been part of every one of his careers. He spent 21 years in the classroom in the Cherry Creek School District in Englewood, Colorado, primarily as an English teacher, but also as a teacher of math, science, and civics. Eric is author of Well Spoken, Teaching Speaking to All Students and Digitally Speaking, How to Improve Student Presentations with Technology, and a program consultant for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt's English Language Arts Collections. ASCD is pleased to welcome Eric Palmer.
Welcome, and what I want to do with you is share some ideas about how to create better podcasts, obviously, and it's true what Alicia said. I am committed to improving oral communication skills, which I think we have shortchanged as teachers, and I'll talk much more about that. But here's what I hope to do in the next hour. I want to introduce you to some new forms of oral communication. But mostly I want to show you how to use them effectively. If you're thinking this will be a high wow factor, I'm going to see all kinds of great tools and all kinds of great websites, you'll be disappointed because it's not so much about the wow factor and introducing a lot of tools. It's much more about how to make these tools really work for kids and how to improve oral communication with them. So let me start with a little bit of a framework. When we think of speaking, we tend to think of situations like this. If I ask folks, tell me about speaking situations, we'll think of a teacher in front of the class. We think of job interviews. Maybe you think of a staff meeting. You probably think of conferences. It's conference season. I've done a few of those this summer already, and I'm sure you've attended some. We think of social situations, a wedding toast, a retirement dinner, and we think of the intimidating situation. I think intimidating for a lot of folks, that microphone and a big crowd out there. And when I ask people to talk about speaking situations, this tends to be what folks mention. But of course, there's a new realm of speaking, like this, for example. I mean, we have webinars where people from around the world are listening to me, and I'm not there. How many people have Skyped? I Skype with my son who lives in the Netherlands. This is face-to-face communication, real-time, for free. This is dumbfounding to me. Obviously, this didn't exist a generation ago, or even a matter of a number of years ago. Video conferences exist, and every device now is a FaceTime device. We see speakers. What this means is that all these digital tools are showcasing speaking skills. How well or how poorly somebody speaks is going to be noticed. You can't hide out like you could, as I said, a generation ago. We have to do much more to make kids effective oral communicators because their oral communication will be showcased. And the truth is that professional and social success will depend a large amount on your ability to communicate successfully. So let me start with something exciting. Common Core State Standards. And I say exciting because, man, is there drama about these. There's a tremendous amount of drama. It turns out that evil liberals are taking over education. It turns out that evil billionaires like Bill Gates are taking over education. It turns out that testing is going to make all of us look bad. There's a tremendous amount of drama, and I get that, and I don't want to diminish that, but I do want to point out that in all of that drama, almost never does anybody actually talk about a particular standard. They talk about the drama, but they don't talk about particular standards, and Common Core standards, I think, have contributed some things. I'm a little worried about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. For example, in Colorado, we've had standards since 1995. And we had reading and writing. Now, because of this push from Common Core standards, we have reading, writing, speaking, and listening. We now include the most predominant language arts because 75% of our communication time is speaking and listening. So I think that's a contribution. Let me show you, just for fun, the standards, the Common Core standards for speaking and listening. The first three are roughly the listening standard, the next three roughly the speaking standard. And I would be surprised if anybody watching the webinar or anybody not watching the webinar would have a problem with any of these standards. I would be stunned if somebody said, no, I don't want my child to do that. I don't want my child to be able to integrate and evaluate information presenting in diverse media and formats. I don't want my child to present information, findings, and supporting evidence such that listeners can follow. I'd be shocked if anybody thought that any of these standards were inappropriate. We'll focus mostly today on number 5, making strategic use of digital media and visual displays, and number 6, adapting speech to a variety of contexts. So I'm happy that the Common Core standards have contributed speaking and listening and moved it to our consciousness. In the language of the Common Core standards, they talk about how students should employ technology thoughtfully to enhance their speaking and listening. They should use technology. They should be familiar with the strengths and limitations of various technological tools, and they can select and use those best suited to communication goals. 2 comments. A, technology, technology, technology. We have to update our instruction. I think that's another nice push that the Common Core standards have given us. We're well into the 21st century, and a lot of our classrooms still look like 1980. The second comment I want to make is, notice we're selecting and using tools suited to communication goals. If you don't have anything to communicate, don't use the tool. You have to have as a goal contributing something to the conversation. I see a lot of people fascinated with the tool and having kids record, but they really don't have anything to communicate yet. So that's what I want to focus on. If you are curious about where the technology comes in, it's pretty early. Common Core standards suggest that in 3rd grade, kids should create engaging audio recordings. And by 7th grade, they should include multimedia components in visual displays and presentations. Now think about that for a minute. I still see large numbers of 7th graders with their trifold brochure about countries in Central America. I see people making dioramas in a shoebox of biomes. I see people holding a poster board that Dad bought at Walmart an hour before it closed, the day before the presentation was due. That's a long way away from including multimedia components in visual displays. Now, what the standards realize is that our kids are somewhat time travelers. They're in 2014 when they leave our classrooms, and then they come back to 1980, as I said, when they walk in the door, and we kind of pretend these things don't exist. But we have to start updating our instruction. Now, let me get a sense of where you are, and I'll have Alicia put up a poll. I'm just kind of curious how many of you have used videos, podcasts, digital storytelling a lot, how many of you have tried it once, how many of you haven't used anything yet, but you're thinking about it for next year, and the last category, I'm scared to try anything. I don't even know why I'm at this webinar. I'm not sure that that's exactly what the question says. Now, I have to caution, as I'm seeing a lot of people who frequently create videos, there is a point where you may feel that I'm criticizing you, because what I will do is mention the fact that a lot of videos that have been created showcase how poorly people speak. I don't have a problem with the kids. It's not their fault. They weren't taught. But I sort of have a problem with teachers that are using tools before the communication that's being showcased has been properly developed. Well, I like that one person that said they're scared to try anything. But they won't be. You won't be after you see this. So it looks like we're, like a lot of folks have used a bunch of tools, and a lot of folks have tried it. So great. At least 2/3 of us have some experience with the tools. What I'll share with you, of course, is the framework for making these things more successful. Now, we're talking about communication tools. Again, it's the communication that counts. And showing how the tool works is not the same as teaching how to use it well. I get a sense that there are a lot of teachers who have shown kids, here's the ON, OFF button, and this is how you record, and this is how you save, and this is how you post, and they've shown the kids how the tool works. But they haven't shown them how to use it well. They haven't shown them how to create the core communication that's being showcased by the tool. And so that's where we're headed. Got a little glitch right here. Let me fix that. Here's what I've discovered. If I ask teachers what it takes to be an effective speaker, I find out that we don't really have a great idea of what it takes to be an effective speaker, and that's not surprising. There's not one teacher preparation program in America that teaches teachers how to teach speaking. You haven't had any in-services or workshops in your district. You've had things about bully proofing and RTI and equity in education. You've never had anything about how to teach speaking. It's something we have ignored. And when I ask teachers what it takes, I get a lot of terms, and they change from class to class, from teacher to teacher, and some of them are obscure: elocution, vocal intonation, pitch, speak slowly, speak loudly. We throw out all these different terms, and it's confusing to kids and confusing to us. So what I want to do is lay out first a framework for all effective oral communication, whether one-on-one or small group, or on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial with 500,000 people, or in person, or digitally on a podcast or a video for YouTube. This is the framework for all effective oral communication. And it starts with the realization that there are two distinct parts, what I call building a speech and performing a speech. And if you get nothing else out of this hour, at least clarify this in the minds of your students, because these are very distinct. Building a speech refers to everything you do before you open your mouth. And that is radically different from what you do as you are speaking, that I call performing a speech. Never blend these on a rubric, and it is critical for speakers, and it actually would be critical for you as well, to visualize these and conceptualize these two distinct parts. And by the way, don't get confused by the term speech. I'm really talking about any talk, even one-on-one. I'm going to think about what I'm going to say and build something first, and then I'm going to perform it. So it is important to conceptualize this for kids, and certainly important as we're building a digital communication, performing a digital communication. It's important to think of these parts. So let me go over them quickly. It's really the topic of a different webinar, but I want to share them. This is what it takes before you open your mouth. Again, one-on-one, small group, in-person, digital podcast. This is what you have to do. You have to build the talk. We have to think of the audience. You've seen and heard a large number of student presentations, and the class didn't really get engaged with it. They didn't care much. It wasn't that interesting. We have to start with the audience. Who are they? What are they like? What do they know? What do they need to know? What mood are they in? We don't do enough audience analysis, but any good talk would be tailored to its specific audience. And then I worry about content. I haven't opened my mouth yet. I'm just building the talk. And we have to worry about important and interesting information. And if you had important and interesting information designed for the audience, it would be a good talk, but I would prefer a great talk. So I also introduced these terms. Part of the content should include connectors. Any speech has to connect with its particular audience. You, as I said, have seen a lot of speeches that just went right over the kids' heads. And you thought, I don't get it. It doesn't connect with the audience. You must have specific statements that will connect your topic to your audience. There's a difference between, I'm going to talk about a Supreme Court case on search and seizure, and how many of you have cell phones? How many of you would be okay if the principal took your cell phone and went through your text messages? Well, my case is like that in that something was searched without permission. Oh, you just connected that topic to us now. Thank you. Part of content are clarifiers. You know things that I don't know. You did the research. You read the book. You're a soccer maniac. I don't know what stoppage time is. I don't know what penalty kicks are. So any speech would clarify those things. It's part of the audience analysis to know what you have to clarify. And content is also what to exclude. We have to exclude what I call verbal viruses. These are things that infect our speech. It's not like and These are things like, because I think that we all listen to kids who say and we record them, and it's crazy that we don't stop that. Verbal viruses. By the way, adults are infected with things too. I don't know why we're all infected with the word utilize right now. Count the number of times you hear utilize. I'm going to utilize my laptop projector and utilize my screen and utilize, just use stuff. Just use it. You don't have to utilize things. So that's content. And I still haven't spoken, right? I'm just analyze the audience, put in content. I have to organize it. I need a beginning, a middle, and an end. And you've probably heard the basic speech plan. Tell us what you're going to say it, tell us what you said. And that's useful. That's a very good starting place as I build a speech. Visual aids are sometimes important, certainly in the digital world they are. But have you had a lesson with kids about how to make the aids relevant? Is this the thing from the book that would represent that book for us? Is this the number one idea that could be conveyed from that topic? Are they accessible? Do we understand it? Can we see it? I see people who make visual aids that you can't see in the back of the room. That's ridiculous. Are they important? And this is a lesson for all of us. You don't put every word up there. If you have bullet points with complete sentences, you have made yourself redundant. Anything up there should be important. And finally, visual aids should be designed and not decorated. There are so many ways to garbage up a screen with Notebook for smartboards or Active Inspire for Promethean or PowerPoint or Keynote. So many ways to garbage up a screen. Don't do it. Teach kids how to design something. And finally, I worry about appearance. We do judge a book by its cover, and so we have to make sure that we convey the image we want to convey, dress for the occasion. I've done all of this before I open my mouth. I have built this thing by thinking about the audience and designing presentations particularly for them, by adding important, interesting content that connects with them and is clarified and avoids annoying viruses. I've organized it with a beginning, middle, and an end. I've got powerful visual aids. I look the way I should look. I do all of this before I open my mouth. Now, here's the trick, isn't it? It doesn't matter how well you build something if you can't perform it. And notice I use the word performing rather than delivery. I think there's a connotation to delivery that's misleading. Delivery is easy. Deliver a letter, deliver a package. This is not that. We are performing. And we're really performing whether it's one-on-one, again, small group, large group, in person. It is a performance. So I wanted to take all those obscure terms, some of which I mentioned earlier, and put them into multiple trait speaking, if you will, 6 trait speaking. And decades ago, I put this on the board. And as soon as I put it on the board, someone said, PV legs. Why, well, yes, PV legs. Unintended, but it caught on. It took on a life of its own, and as you'll see later, my website is pvlegs.com. What's true is this: PV legs is dumb, but it's dumb just like Roy G. Biv is dumb. Millions of people know the colors of the rainbow because of Roy G. Biv, and I would be ecstatic if millions of people became better speakers because of PV legs. So let me share with you what this is. Any performance starts with poise. And notice that this encompasses a lot of terms that people use: posture, stand still, head up. Poise. That's what I tell students. You need to appear calm and confident. Appear calm and confident. I get that you aren't until you become a polished speaker. And that means you avoid shuffling, rocking, fidgeting. By the way, everybody has one thing they do. So do you. Maybe it's flicking the hair out of your eyes. Maybe it's tugging at the sleeves, tugging at your untucked shirt, twirling the string of the hoodie. But it starts with poise. You have to appear calm and confident. Voice. This encompasses so much: articulation, enunciation, elocution, projection, volume. Voice, every word heard. That's all I'm after. I need to hear every word. Commonly, teachers will say, speak loudly. That's bad advice. Speaking loudly is annoying. I do need to hear every word, but I don't want kids to speak loudly. I just want to hear every word. Life. Feeling, emotion, and passion. It's the biggest growth area for all speakers. We got to have some life in the voice. People are dull, and a whole lot of what I hear online is extremely dull. You got to have some lessons in life. And by the way, teachers will commonly say enthusiasm, but that's bad advice. If you're talking about cancer or world hunger, enthusiasm is not the emotion we're after. I want some life. I want some passion, but it isn't enthusiasm. Eye contact, we all know this. I haven't been any place in North America where that didn't show up. We know that one. And it's true. Gestures, hands, face, and body, that's part of being an effective speaker. And finally, speed. Again, commonly teachers will say speak slowly. That's bad advice. Speaking slowly is quite dull. I do want you to pay attention to speed and know that sometimes you speak too quickly. But mostly I want you to know that fast and slow works. You speed up at some parts for effect. You slow down for effect. And pauses work for emphasizing a point. So really what we have is a 6 way to assess speaking and to teach kids what it takes to be an effective speaker. And I can boil it down to these terms. Now you can watch any speaker you admire, and there's nothing else happening but this. Put the scale on anybody you watch and say, yes, they were poised, they had a voice such that I could hear every word, they had some life in their voice, they made eye contact, they used gestures well, they used speed well. That's what it takes to be an effective performer. Now clearly giving somebody the blueprint is quite a bit different than having a house built. We have to give kids practice with these things. But this is what it takes. And it, again, is for any situation, building and performing. I'm flying tomorrow to Portland for my son's wedding. You don't think I've spent a lot of time building that talk? What's the audience going to be? What's the content I want to include? How do I want to organize that? I don't have visual aids, but have I spent time thinking about my appearance? Yes, and so has my wife. We had to go through I don't know how many ties, but that's a different story. Have I spent time thinking about the performance of that speech? How I can be poised, even though I may be tempted to cry? Making sure my voice is heard, adding life? Yes, of course I'm doing that. And I did that for back-to-school speeches. Do I want students to go through that process before they make a Socratic Circle comment? Yes. Who's the audience for this comment? What do you want to include in your comment? How do you want to organize your thought? Do I want kids to perform it? Yes. Do I want this to happen in a podcast, in a book report, in a historical fiction book share? Of course. That's what it takes. This is the framework for all effective oral communication. Now, we do have to make some modifications for the digital world. I don't throw the framework out. I still have to build a digital communication, and I still have to perform a digital communication. But let me emphasize a couple of things. In building a digital communication, audience is particularly interesting. Generally, when I'm analyzing an audience, I'm presenting to 29 kids about like me in the class. But in the digital world, this is a much more interesting discussion. Who is the audience for your digital presentation, kids? Will it be everybody else in our school because it'll be on the school website? So I need to make it for K through 6th grade or 9th through 12th grade? Will it be seen by grandmas and grandpas? Will it be seen by parents? Will it be seen by people in other schools, in other countries? It's a fascinating discussion. And designing a presentation for that kind of diverse audience is a bit different than designing a presentation for your classmates. So we need to spend a lot of time before we hit record thinking about the audience for the digital product. By the way, we also have to think of the audience tool that will be used. Are they going to see this on an 8-inch tablet? Will it be projected on a screen? Will it be on a smartphone? Because I'll design my talk differently based on what I'm going to see, or how they're going to see it. So audience is a particularly fun discussion to have before you hit record for that digital presentation. Organization is key. And there are a couple of things we need to be very careful about when we're designing the digital presentation. Let's think about how you're watching this webinar. I mean, let's be honest. Someone is not even at the webinar now. They went and got a drink in the refrigerator and haven't come back yet. Someone else is text messaging on their phone. Someone else is playing with the cat or the dog. I mean, let's be honest. When you're at a webinar, you're getting sort of partial attention while doing something else. And that's true in the digital world. So we have to know that if we're going to keep people interested, we need to have a very powerful opening. There's a big difference between, hi, I'm doing a podcast about composting, and we are being buried under our own trash. There's an island the size of Texas floating in the Pacific Ocean of garbage we have put out there. We need to do something. Ah, well, okay, I'm a little bit more intrigued with that opening than the first one. And I always ask kids to put in signposts in any digital presentation. These are specific verbal markers that tell me where I am. For instance, if I'm driving, I'll see Colorado Springs 62 miles, Colorado Springs 37 miles, Colorado Springs 19 miles. I always know exactly where I am. Because people are coming and going from webinars and digital presentations, I need specific verbal markers. Now that I've told you the causes of acid rain, let me tell you how it affects us. Oh, thank you. I went away there for a minute and got a beverage from the refrigerator. But that's only one of the effects. There are two more. Ah, thank you. I kind of zoned out there. I like to know where I am. A special feature that we add when we're building a digital communication. Visual aids. Notice I had Visual Aids Plus. Because in the digital world, I have to be very careful that I build in a couple of things. I like to build in music in a digital presentation. But I caution you, never, ever, 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 ever use the looping GarageBand soundtrack or whatever other software you're using. Those things are death. There was someone who created a great podcast with their students about bicycle safety and wearing helmets, and the same looping jingle went around every 10 seconds for 5 minutes. If you use music that contributes to the message, and avoid the default looping soundtrack that just is annoying us. So that's a caution, but I like the idea of music, but if it contributes to the message. If you're having kids make an About Me podcast, and some girl's a soccer maniac, have her use the World Cup theme, not a Justin Bieber song. Simple things we can do. And images make a big difference in the digital world. A big difference. This is a slide. It's an actual slide shown by a principal to her staff on the first day of school. Now, this is a person with a doctorate in education and a fine person, a principal of an elementary school, but it's clear that you can get a doctorate in education without ever taking a course in presentation skills, and that shows up, unfortunately, too often. A slide like this is near death in person. In the digital world, it is death. Use images. You may have noticed that I have some 80 images in this presentation because images are much more powerful, especially in the digital world. An extra caution, something to think about when we're building that digital communication. And finally, appearance has a special meaning in a digital world. When you're building a digital presentation, it's not just your appearance that matters, it's what's around you. This girl created a brilliant podcast, and it was a wonderful comment. But was it important to have the vacuum cleaner behind her and the newspapers on the hearth and little brother in the back room watching TV became a distraction? So when you build that digital communication, don't just think about your appearance. Think about the appearance that surrounds you. So yes, I want you to build a communication, but I do want you to think of some special things as you're building the digital communication. Similarly, I don't throw out PV legs. This is part of a digital presentation as well as an in-person presentation. But let me point out a couple of cautions for you. Life. It is so crucial in the digital world. People are listening to a small speaker. You have to have way more life than you might expect. And people were sort of boring in person. Anything you say in person is diminished by 50 or 60% by the time it comes out of a small speaker. I had this pointed out to me years ago when someone gave me a radio show. I was a young guy, and they wanted the young person's view of things. And they said, you can interview anybody you want. And I interviewed a top 40 DJ. And he came into the studio, and he was, I thought, out of control. I said, settle down. Just relax. And then I heard the broadcast, and he sounded fine, and I was incredibly boring. In the digital world, you have to have a lot of life. And if you look at what's out there on podcasts that have been posted to YouTube, you'll realize, I don't want to listen to this. It's dull. They're sweethearts. I hate to be critical of well-meaning kids, but their teachers should have taught them about life because no one's going to pay attention to this podcast. It was a great message. You built it well, but you didn't perform it with enough life. And I worry about camera contact. It's the eye contact of the digital world. Those of you who have Skyped, did you ever get tired of looking at the forehead of the other person? Because commonly, what do, right? They look at the screen unaware that the camera lens is above the screen. So it's critical to teach kids where the camera is and have them make camera contact. That's the person you're speaking to, that camera. So what we have here is a framework for all public speaking and some modifications we make for the digital world. Let me pause here and see if anybody has chimed in with some questions that you may have about that framework and how to tweak it when we're doing a digital presentation. Anything show up?
Yeah, there have been a couple of comments. One, which I thought was insightful, was when you were talking about PV legs. Comment from the attendee was that it requires high self-esteem as well. And I didn't know if you wanted to talk at all to what kind of skills students that feed into that.
Well, I guess I don't know that it does take high self-esteem. I think any child is capable of speaking well. And we sort of think of speaking, I think, often in a different category. You know, well, people are afraid of speaking, and so we sort of defer to that. But there are kids that hate writing and don't feel that they're good writers, and there are kids that hate math and don't feel that they're good at math. So we have, I think, self-esteem issues with any subject matter, but we tend not to allow that to excuse things or something. But I would never say to a child, I know you feel bad about your math skills and you aren't very good at math, and so let's not work on it. PV Legs is a framework that we take at any age of any ability with anybody, and we can say, hey, this will make you a better speaker. And we don't all start out the same way. There are people who are more glib than others, to be sure, just like there are people who are more adept at math. But if I give you a framework, you can begin to get the idea. You know, you're a little less poised than she is right now. But don't worry about that. We're all emerging as speakers. This is a framework that you can use to build yourself as a speaker, and at some point you're going to feel really good about yourself as a speaker. The reason you don't feel good about yourself now is because no one taught you how to do it. They made you do it. They told you to get up and give a book report, but they never told you how to do that well. And so I get that you don't feel good about it, and I get that you don't have much speaking self-esteem, but I can get you there. I can give you a framework that will get you there. So I guess that's kind of how I respond to that. Everybody's going to need oral communication skills. We're all going to have to develop as speakers, and sure, some people feel better about it right now than others, but if you give them instruction, they're all going to feel pretty good about it. You know, I think I'm better at math than I used to be. I think I'm better at art than I used to be. I think I'm better at speaking. Thank you for giving me a framework and teaching me the skills.
Great. And another question, what is the best way to communicate to students the importance of body language when making presentations?
I am all about what I call mini lessons, and you'll find some on my website, again, that I'll share with you at the end of this. You know, we have little lessons about capitalization, and we give kids worksheets about capitalization and lessons about capitalization. I want to have mini lessons about gestures. I'll put up a little phrase and say, let's learn about emphatic hand gestures and see how they add to something. And the kids will come up and they'll see on the board, yes, we won. And some kid will go, yes, we won, and their hands will do something. And I'll say, yeah, there you go. See how that hand gesture added to the meaning. Someone else come up with the same phrase, and they may have a different hand gesture. And we'll practice emphatic hand gestures, and they'll get the concept. And then I'll have a mini lesson about descriptive hand gestures. The dog was very little, but his mouth was very large, and I had bite marks all over my arm. Well, now kids will come up and tell that little mini speech, if you will, with descriptive hand gestures, and we get the concept that these gestures contribute to our talk. It's just a matter of having little lessons to develop the skills, just like we have lessons about topic sentences, order of operations, or anything else that we teach.
All right, I think you can continue the presentation. Thank you.
Very good. Well, let's move on to a couple of other things then. We've got the framework. Let's talk about updating some oral activities. We need to have kids using digital tools to practice a presentation. I always had kids turn in a rough draft before they gave me a final essay. I seldom see teachers having kids give a rough draft before they give a speech. And I don't mean hand you the written speech. That's an essay. I don't want to see the essay. I want to see the speech. I want to see the rough draft of your speech. And it is so easy to get the rough draft of a speech. Those of you with Mac computers, do you know about Photo Booth? It's in the dock of every Macintosh device. It's down in the dock. It will take a video right there and save it to you right there on your Mac. If I have one computer in my room, I'll pass it around. And I'll say, kids, go record your speech. And then we'll look at those rough drafts and make comments about the rough draft of the speech. Or I'll put kids in a group. You four pass this computer around. After you've all recorded your speeches, go back and look at them and talk about how well built they are, how well performed they are. You have the framework to understand speaking, so now we can analyze these speeches. I think that it's crazy that we aren't using these kind of tools for the rough draft of a speech and letting kids look at themselves and give themselves feedback before they get up in front of the class. If you don't have a Macintosh, you've got a PC that has some kind of webcam. As you can see on the left, mine has Dell webcam. And the kids know these tools. If you aren't familiar with it, don't worry. You have someone in your class who is adept with this. By the way, Microsoft also has an accessories folder. In that accessories folder, you can see it at the top of the list on the left, there's something called Sound Recorder. And that's built in. Kids just click on that, they record themselves, it's saved to the desktop. Now let's listen to that talk. It amazes me that we aren't having kids use these things for practice. Smartphones. An enormous number of kids have smartphones. Most of them now have a built-in message system. I have Easy Voice Recorder for my Android phone. I can record myself. I can send it to someone else for feedback. I can send it to the teacher for feedback. We need to have kids use these tools to encourage them to speak and to rehearse the speeches that they're going to give. Volcker Rule. If you don't know Volcker Rule, you should be introduced to Volcker Rule. This is the homepage for VolckerRule.com. You don't sign up, you don't register, there's no password, there's no fee. That's the homepage. Obviously, very young kids can figure this out, right? I'm going to click to record, I'm going to click to stop, and when I'm done, I can listen to it. I can retry it if I don't like it. Now, let me point out while I'm here that I've advertised this as a practice tool in a way that kids can send you a rough draft of a talk after you've introduced the framework of how to build and perform it. You're thinking already of a bunch of other ways you can use Volcker Rule. For the shy child, for the kid that doesn't have a lot of self-esteem of speaking yet. I'll tell you what, sweetheart, go home and practice with Volcker Rule and record and record and record until you get it the way you want. At some point, if you're happy with the recording, you can see that it says click here to save. If you do that, you get an address, the HTTP thing. You can get an embed code if you put it on a wiki page or a website, or you can email it. I would have my students click on email. They type in my email address, and now I have a link to their talk. You would not do Reader's Theater in my class unless you had practiced Reader's Theater, done a Volcker Rule of your part, and emailed it to me. It's just a way to encourage better speaking and give kids a way to understand how to improve as speakers before we showcase what they're going to say. I think these tools should be used for continuing a discussion. Again, Volcker Rule. We ran out of time. I didn't hear from everybody today. So tonight, go home, record your comment on Volcker Rule, and send it to me. And again, for the child who you never hear from, maybe they're a little slower to process. Maybe they think of things later. Maybe they're embarrassed to speak in class right now because they haven't developed as a speaker yet. Not surprising. No one taught them how. I'll tell you what. You go home and make your comment, and we'll start the discussion tomorrow with your recorded comment. I can do the same thing with a smartphone for those of you that have kids that have smartphones. How about if you make your comment on the smartphone? Let me share another tool with you that I think is amazingly wonderful, highly engaging for kids, but there's a caution. Flipgrid.com has a cost. I think it's $65 a year. There's a cost to it, but it is an enormously engaging way for kids to develop as speakers. The teacher puts up a prompt. Kids get that prompt online. They click on the plus, and they will record a video with their computer. I was working Actually, I got this idea from a teacher in Minnesota who had her class use this class computer. They recorded their comments right there because maybe not all the students had access to that kind of technology at home. A great idea. You click the green plus, you'll record yourself, and your video will be added to the line, and we can watch everybody's video comments and then make our own. A brilliant way to encourage speaking, to engage students, and to practice speaking skills. VoiceThread.com, I think there's a free version, but there's a cost here as well. You can see the idea. The teacher creates a prompt. You can put up an image, as I've done here. You can put up text. I've seen this used with an art class where someone put up a Picasso painting and we would discuss in art the elements of the painting. Notice at the bottom, comment. I send the link to you. You click on the comment button and your comment shows up on the side with your picture if you prefer, or with an icon. An enormously engaging way for kids to speak. It encourages them to participate. It gives them a chance to practice their comment over and over. Enormously engaging things that we should be doing to update our speaking instruction. And I think there's some things we can do to produce presentations. I mentioned before, this idea of holding up poster boards and trifold brochures, that has to go away. We have to update our presentations, and I think that's something that's going to be a real push for us. Not all of us are familiar with these things or comfortable with these tools ourselves. Let me say this. You have someone in your class like Tabor. Tabor was in my class. Tabor knew everything about anything. I was teaching 8th grade at the time. Anytime I had a problem with any of the tools that I was trying to use in class, I would just, Tabor, can you help me with this? And he could. You have those kids in your class, and even in young classes. So don't be afraid of trying something. I do want you to update instruction. You don't have to do everything, but we really should do something. One thing we can use, Adobe Presenter 10, people who have sponsored this. Screen capture technology is out there with Integrity, Screencast-O-Matic, TouchCast. Why are we having kids do kind of the boring presentations they've done when these kind of tools exist for creating instruction and presentations? I hope you know about Glogster. Glogster creates an online poster, if you will. Something like this. When you go to Glogster, you can choose a wall, that's the background. You can choose graphics. It seems pretty intuitive, right? You can add all these different designs. Notice there's a button for audio. I click on audio, and I can record myself. When I'm done, I have an interactive online poster. In this case, you can see some 4th graders put up a spreadsheet of pet ownership, where their income came from, what the expenses were. They had a ball python, which they named Pretzel because they thought it looked like that kind of fat pretzel. Embedded in the poster is a video of Pretzel eating. By the way, ball pythons eat live mice. They squeeze them to death and then swallow them whole. It's a video that not everybody wants to watch, I guess. And at the bottom, where the play button is, they've recorded themselves talking about the project. This is where we have to go. And certainly before we hit that record button, we had to have the lessons about building a speech and performing a speech so that when you look at this poster and listen to it, it's something engaging. I'm intrigued with Little Bird Tales, littlebirdtales.com. I like it because it's free to create an account. And when you create an account, you can create a tale. What I really appreciate about it, especially for little folks, is that you're looking at the art and adding your voice on the same screen. You can upload an image. What I think a lot of teachers do is have kids draw the picture and scan it into the computer. So a kindergartner who has written a story, I can upload their drawings and have them narrate their story. Or if the 1st grade class has gone to the zoo, we'll have each kid talk about a picture. Skippy, come on up here and talk about the tiger picture you drew. Muffin, next page is yours, talk about the lion. Tamisha, the next page is yours, talking about the elephant. And I have a narrated book when I'm done of our trip to the zoo. I get the embed code so I could put it on the class wiki page or web page. Or I get the address, so I can send that web address to Grandma and Grandpa, to anybody I want. And now I have a narrated slideshow or my own story in my own words. Enormously engaging for kids, and another great excuse to give us some opportunities to teach lessons about effective speaking. You know what, sweetheart? Before we save this, let's add a little more life. Or before we save this, let's be a little more poised, because I heard a lot of ums and uhs and it seemed like you were nervous. We're not wasting tape here. We can record this over and over again, and we can work on it and finally get it to where we want it before we hit record. For older kids, I like Compressor, which is a narrated slideshow. It's a narrated slideshow. It's also something you can create for free. You sign up for free. You upload an image. And if you look at the bottom of the screen where the image was uploaded, that's Nationals Ballpark in Washington, D.C., by the way. If you hit record at the bottom of that screen, you get a chance to record. Do you want to take a snapshot? Do you want to record a video? Do you want to record audio? I'd like to record audio. Kids get used to seeing the red button. They know that means record. And when I'm done, you see a little box at the top of that screen now. That's my narration. And now I have a narrated slideshow. I can do our 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. Each child contributes an image and talks about it. And now I have a narrated slideshow. Again, highly engaging for kids to create this. Much more fun than just presenting to 29 kids in class and they'll be over in 4 minutes and I don't really care if they got it or not. This will be published and other people will see it, and I can practice and practice and practice and get the comment the way I want it. Just some simple ideas of things I think we ought to be doing. Let me pause here and ask if there are any questions that have come up about these tools and how to use them for practicing a presentation or continuing a discussion or doing a presentation.
We haven't had any questions about the digital tools portion of the webinar, so I'd like to save the last couple for the end of your presentation.
Well, I
think that
would probably be the same as now, so sure.
So just one last call for attendees. If there are any questions you would like to pose to Eric, please enter them in the questions panes now. A couple of questions about when it might be more appropriate or a good option to include non-digital presentations as well as a presentation option. Is there a scenario?
Well,
go ahead.
I don't want to give the impression, and I hope I haven't, that we can only speak digitally. I do want kids to know that digital tools need to be incorporated, but certainly face-to-face communication is necessary as well. When you're going to sit down at the job interview with somebody and defend your graphic design portfolio, you know, I need to be ready for that as well. So I would be happy, for instance, if someone said, well, we do a book report a quarter, a different genre every quarter. The first quarter is historical fiction. The second quarter is mystery. You know what, the first quarter, let's do that one analog. I still want you to build an effective speech. I still want you to use PB legs, but that's going to be right here in person, live, in front of 29 kids. But for the second one, let's incorporate a little multimedia. I need something more in that presentation. And then maybe by the fourth quarter, we're going to do a digital presentation. That fourth quarter book report isn't going to look anything like the one did in October. That'll be all media. Let's incorporate multimedia tools. I might see it that way, as build into these things.
Okay. Got a lot of people who've submitted comments here for web tools.
I hope people are sharing their web tools. I mean, I've only shared a couple because it's a short webinar, but they're, you know, Tegrity, Panopto, EduCreation, ScreenChop, Narrable. I love Narrable. So if other people are sharing things that they're doing, great, because anything I showed, there are 10 other versions of ways to make digital slideshows. There are 10 other versions of ways to do screen captures, 10 other versions of ways. So don't get buried in all the tools out there, but do pick one and play with it.
I'm getting requests for links to the tools that you mentioned in this webinar, and I'll provide in the follow-up email to this presentation information about where you can go to get a list of the tools that Eric has mentioned in this presentation. I'll work with you, Eric, on posting that to the internet in the meantime.
By the way, a lot of those are at pvlegs.com, my website. I've got links on there. And I also have some tutorials on there. I attended a lot of presentations. I'm not Mr. Tech Wizard. And I went to the presentation and thought, oh, I got it. And then I'd go home and realize I didn't got it. So on my website, I also have some tutorials about how to use these things, which you can watch or have your students watch and teach themselves. So some of them are there as well. There are other resources, and I'd be happy to work with you as well, Alicia, to get these out.
Great. So does recording become difficult if you're doing some recording in the classroom while other students are working?
It does, although I found that kids are pretty good at compartmentalizing. But certainly, as you record, you will hear ambient noises from the other kids in their group. I mean, we know, we sort of pay attention that Muffin right now is recording her speech. I actually use something as dumb as this. I'll take 8.5 by 11 paper and roll it up into a tube. And then I will talk into the tube directly into the microphone of the computer, which helps cut down that ambient noise. But kids get pretty good pretty quick at kind of tuning out that distraction. If it's part of what happens in your class, oh yeah, it's their turn to record their speeches. And I wouldn't let that scare you. I would go ahead and let that get messy and still use the tools.
I have had some questions about assessments or rubrics for evaluating students on their presentations. It's not something you covered in depth. Do you have any information beyond the PV legs concept that you'd like to share?
Well, again, I have on the website, you'll see that there's a page of rubrics, and there are some rubrics for normal speaking and rubrics for podcasts and digital speaking. So feel free to go to the website and download those. The bottom line is this. Any evaluation has to fairly evaluate building and performing. If we make a mistake as teachers in evaluating, we tend to grossly overweight how well kids build a speech. We get the massive points for the essay writing and very few points for muttering the essay out loud. That's sort of how we think of speeches. And as I see in the digital podcast rubrics, people tend to value the glitz, but sort of forget about the core message and the skills that are being showcased. So as a general caution, when you're building a digital evaluation, don't get caught up on evaluating only the glitz. I still need the core communication. That's why we use the tool in the first place. And the second thing I would point out is that kids have to be involved in evaluating. It should not just be a teacher evaluating. Any talk is for an audience, and it matters whether the audience got it. And so I have to have kids involved in grading my podcasts and grading my in-class presentations. And that's edgy for some. I think, well, that's a popularity contest. But I haven't had that happen. In 21 years of teaching, I haven't had it turn into that. They understand what they're doing. They know if this was well built. They know if that child was poised. They know if there was life. So I would definitely use the same building and performance framework, and I would include the audience in any evaluations.
Okay, and do you find it enormously time-consuming to review the rough drafts of the presentations, or do you perhaps listen to only the first few minutes of the presentation as opposed to the whole thing?
Well, this is important for all time, right? So I would say posterity lens the presentation all the way through. I don't. What I would do is spot check. I would listen. Certainly, if certain kids I was concerned about, I would listen to theirs, see what I'm help. some kids I was worried about that they didn't do their work. I'd look at theirs, and then I would spot check and say, oh, this is a great teaching opportunity. I can use this one to share how to do more effective gestures, or to share how to have more life. Did the students know that I don't listen to all of them? I don't think so. But the reality is I didn't listen to all of them.
Okay, and we'll do one last question here. How do you get administrator and teacher buy-in to the idea of using these digital tools?
It's just a matter of accepting reality. I mean, just share reality and what is going to be expected and what tools are out there. I don't know why we're so resistant to using the tools that these kids are using outside of class all the time. I had a lot of success just doing these in my class, and the enthusiasm and engagement spilled over, and then the teacher next to me would say, what's going on there? What did you do? And then it spreads that way until finally a bunch of folks are saying, you know what, this is a good project. Why don't we all do it this way? So, I mean, the reality is that we have to get with the program, and these tools are out there, and they're enormously engaging and enormously beneficial. And the reality is that speaking skills matter. So it's a bit of a tough sell, but it'll sell itself after a couple of times that you use these tools. Well, let me do this. Let me share my email address. Feel free to contact me if I was unclear about something, or contact me to share successes or failures. I would love to know what's going on in your class. The website is there, obviously, pvlegs.com. And as I said, there's some tutorials, some other ideas that I didn't share in this webinar, but other tools I think are useful. Rubrics are there. Explore it. Use anything you can. But mostly, thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you so much for your engagement. And thank you so much for giving kids a voice.
Thank you, Eric. Eric Palmer's ASCD book, Teaching the Core Skills of Listening and Speaking, is available in the ASCD store. Visit shop.ascd.org and search for Eric's name to purchase.